what could be the advice that you can give to startups, except for cutting costs and making sure that your cash position is good? Can you advise on some and pivoting into the sectors which becoming a drug rather than a vitamin? Can you give any additional advice to them?
Okay. At first, you should avoid a situation where you raise money not for growth, but for saving the company. Because investors like to invest in a growing company. No investor are enthusiastic about investing in a company whose future looks doubtful. And also, I completely agree with Robin. If your startup has a growth right now, try to predict what will happen when it finishes. For example, if you produce some innovation masks, I hope we will not use the mask for a few months when situation goes back. But if you use Zoom for a meeting after coronavirus, of course, we will use it not so actively, but you will do it because it became a habit. And we need to think about the future, because if you are a business angel or you are IVC, you will earn money after 1 or more years after investment. And we think about the future, what will happen after this coronavirus, what will popular year or 2 years
past. Okay, thank you. Philippe, do you have any advice?
Yeah. First, when starting companies, I think it's super difficult as investor all around the table to predict what will work. What is sure is that there will be a shift in 2 directions at least. I fully agree that looking at what works now is not helpful, but looking at will certainly work less in the future is very helpful. Let's give an example. Long distance B2B travel is probably going to change. B2B travel is going to change. People will probably travel less. That means we are evaluating the options, not that much on what is going to benefit from the crisis, but probably from the industries that are going to suffer from the crisis, and not from the current crisis, but of the consequences of the crisis. And that would be my first advice. Be sure to really look at the industry you want to be in. Second element, don't cut product cost. You need to invest in product now. The war for talent is not going to disappear. And I think the advice that we give to all of our startups, invest in your product now, invest in technology, avoid as much as possible to lay off any people in these domains. And because there is money on the table, the best company are going to hire from you the best talent, and it will be a nightmare in 6 months. Third advice, try to look at what could be lasting consequences. It's very difficult to imagine, but I like to work on concepts rather than on small ideas. For example, the emergence of what has been described as an appointment society, where people before meeting or before take appointments more and more, as they did with doctors. And when you look at Push Doctor, when you look at Doctolib, that has been a huge success. But an appointment economy could be, to describe, more popular in many industries. Also, I will encourage people at looking at what could be a low-touch society, where people are slightly more distant, and I think it creates tremendous opportunities for the new entrepreneurs. As regards the existing startup, what I will advise them to do is first to go after all the grants and subsidies. As Robin says, there are tons in Europe. convertibles, mandatory bank loans, you can gain at least 6 months of runway if you are smart, which make up the gap that Inka described. You get back to 24 months. Second advice, look at, if you are in a very early stage, go to VCs that are closer to your home. Third advice, go to VCs, not what I would say the more amateurish investors, the people that get in, get out. For example, what is clear in the market for the time being, family offices, corporate VCs are by nature more prudent in such a crisis than a VC. It's our day and life is to invest. We can slow down for 3 months, we can slow down for 5 months, we can't slow down for a year. Family offices or hedge funds or corporate VCs, they are, as we speak, reevaluating their long-term involvement in the VC industry.
Okay, thank you. Inka, do you have anything to add to this? Some practical advice to startups? You know?
Yeah, so immediately when they started, and I have a lot of my portfolio companies working on various, businesses across China, and basically it was very obvious what would happen. And we started to basically work with our teams very early on. And I think the key point here is really the people. Making sure that people feel safe, they can work remotely, they're being also supported. Not everyone adapted that well to this remote working. People have families and all of this. So, kind of supporting your key asset, which is really the people that you have in your company, to make sure that you have a future. But then going forward, it really depends on the stage and the industry of the company. To give you a few examples, one of companies that I'm in founder investor works in area of e-commerce search, and obviously e-commerce is booming now, but not in all sectors. So in a way, basically what we started to work on category analysis and following very quickly what kind of opportunities there are. So you kind of have to pivot your sales team very quickly, even though your churn wouldn't go down, but you still may have to kind of attract the customers with a different model. So the kind of a day-to-day sales work of your big global sales team had to change. And then we have a company who's developing protein out of feeding bacteria's CO2 from solar energy by using solar energy. So they're building a factory. Nothing changes. It's more like you just keep people safe. So in this respect, obviously the short-term capabilities and how quickly the team's able to adjust is one thing, and you adapt, you use all those monetary instruments and so forth, and so be it. But then here, I would also say that if you look a bit step ahead, obviously we're going to see a change in the society. And one thing for sure is that, for example, if we look through robotization or automation, obviously the businesses and companies are going to invest even more to that in the future to make sure that we can keep our production going without human interference. We're going to see a huge investment in national capacities relating to health tech. So there is just the question, I think the country level dependency on other countries is going to decrease in this respect. And that's going to mean a lot of business opportunities in the long term. I think the biggest surprises might be in the areas, for example, relating to mobility, and we all were, let's say, looking that the future will be people not owning cars or anything like this, and suddenly we have a pandemic and people don't necessarily want to use a public transportation. So my point here is that with the short-term scenario work, which every business leader is supposed to do in the startup or in a bigger company, that's one thing. But then this long-term megatrend understanding is really the key. And maybe my advice for all of the companies is that, as said here by Dmitry, it's you need to build a growth story or be in a growth trajectory in order to be an appealing target for any investor. So I think the time for this I think we're going to see less of these huge pure tech play investment rounds. So, you know, these tech stories will disappear. It'll be more of the time of, you know, practical applications and solutions and people adapting the technology to day-to-day lives. So these would be my comments.
Thank you, Inka. Yeah, I'm just putting myself in the startupper's shoes, as I am in startupper's shoes. I can imagine it's pretty conflicted instructions, you know, to save cash, leave people, do not lose people, and grow, pivot. Oh my God, it's a crazy feat, you know, it's a very difficult task that they have at hand, but what would you do? Claire, can you suggest anything to startup, you know, some practical advice, something that was not mentioned before?
Yeah, sure. So to add on all the good advices that were given, so maybe a practical advice for the startups that are currently raising money. I think in their pitches, they should definitely address the COVID situation. And I'm saying that only because I have, we see, you know, so many pitches, and recently I've been surprised, you know, when pitches just didn't mention, like, what's the impact of the current COVID situation? Sometimes it has, you know, a positive impact, but you're not even mentioning it. And sometimes, you know, we would expect that, for example, if you're in a particular domain that mixes, you know, for example, tourism or mobility or whatever, we know there's a huge impact. I think you should anticipate the question for investors to say, how is this current situation impacting your business? Is it creating opportunities? Is it creating some delays? Are you able to measure those delays? Are you able to put some costs near those delays? So that, I think that would be one advice, you know, don't forget to mention it. You know, it's big, you know, we all know it's there. And the second thing is valuations. We touched upon valuations very briefly. This could be the topic of a whole webinar. You know, last year, we facilitated, I think, about 35 rounds of financing with our angel group. And most of it, for the first time in many years, was refinancing of companies in which our angels had already invested. One of the reasons why was that the angels felt that the valuations were extremely high compared to the stage of development of the companies, you know, the current turnover, if there was one. And I think that's a point of attention. We've seen a number of startups already last year spending a very long time raising money just because the valuations were just inadequate compared to, you know, the market status, their stage of development, their KPIs and comparables. And I think that is going to be aggravated in a sense by this crisis. And I think that, you know, we already feel that fundraising might take a bit longer. We're doing everything we can. I think, as Philippe said, you know, when it's your day-to-day job as an angel group, what we're trying to do is make sure that our angels, you know, continue to meet the startups and, you know, do their own due diligence and take investment decisions. But, you know, the fact that you can't meet sometimes causes some delays. And I think that startups have to be very careful that, as we said during the introduction, the money's there, but the situation has changed, and there will be a lot of demand. I think angels and other investors will be looking for the best entrepreneurs, first of all, and will be probably pretty challenging, and even more so than before on valuations. So that's something to take into account. Probably more than before, whether valuations are correct for the startups, or will it create a even longer delay for them to raise?
But,
okay.
Yeah, maybe also I always tell to the entrepreneurs that digitalization is going to accelerate, not to slow down, and it's a huge opportunity in the midterm. What is interesting is that the first statistics that we see out of China is that the trends of e-commerce software is faster after the COVID than it was before the COVID. I'm not speaking about the COVID period. There has been a huge growth, but after the confinement in China, it's further accelerating compared to pre-COVID situation, which means in my view, it will be very different from 2001, very different to 2008, B2C or B2B, back to consulting, back to banking. It's over. I am very, very optimistic in the midterm.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from the audience because very soon we would need to wrap up.
Yeah,
and
sorry, can I maybe just add one more thing to the lab, because this was really good advice, but I'm sort of disagreeing with one of the things that was said about downsizing in startups. And the reason for that is that if you look at the US, they usually approach things more aggressively. They're more aggressive in sales. They go faster in product development. They hire a lot faster. They also downsize a lot faster. This is also because they can. So it's a part of the legislation and culture as well. But I fear sometimes European startups are not fast enough in cutting down to a more healthy size because of this crisis. It's a crisis, so sometimes you don't have the option. Sometimes it's also accelerating something you should have already done, you know, kind of focus on a certain product and cut out sort of the things you were experimenting with, maybe cutting down on sales because there's nothing to sell at the moment. Just, you know, I fear sometimes they're being too careful. There was a survey for Belgian startups that said like 50% fear that they might run out of cash by September, and only 75% is thinking about laying off even one person. So I'm thinking,
but that's a good point.
If you wait until the end of September, then you're not going to have anyone to employ because you're going to be out of business. So what's the point?
I have to comment here. I think it's really dependent. If you have a second time or third time serial entrepreneur, they will cut costs. So I think it's a question of experience. You know, what is the generation of entrepreneur that is building that company?
And Robin, I mentioned product and tech team. I didn't say at all that you shouldn't cut costs in your sales team.
Yeah, you can't cut costs in sales, you can't cut costs in product. Yeah. Okay.
No, but I fully agree. That's what we've seen in the portfolio companies. Our angels, as Philippe said, you know, you focus on product. This is a good time to have customer feedback. Put all your teams have to develop the product, which, you know, sometimes is you don't focus enough, because if you can't sell or you can't sell that much, then this is where your focus should go. In resources.
Thank you. And we have a question from the audience, which actually from Amrita. How would evaluation change of startups pursuing growth with limited hiring? RVC is going to resuscitate portfolio companies that may run dry. I guess it might be the question to Philippe and Inka, because you are VCs.
Inka, you want to start?
Are you going to resuscitate your portfolio businesses?
Sorry, I
revive.
Why don't you, Philippe, start?
Okay, for sure. Of course, we made a thorough evaluation of all of our portfolio, and to be very clear with you, we have companies that have completely stopped. We have 2 companies in the travel space that are completely stopped for now. 0 revenues. We took the decision at its phenomenal startup, great technology, superb serial entrepreneurs. We have made the definitive choice to back them because we think it's temporary. We have planned for 0 revenues for 6 months. That means that we aggressively cut costs in the sales team. We continue to develop the technology, and I think this company will get even stronger out of the crisis. On the other side, if you have a mediocre team, that's the time where there is tough partnership decision, but these companies have very little chance to survive. That means it's less, and what I want to insist on, what I mean is that it's less dependent on the current situation, because we know it will be temporary, but it's a time to make very tough decision for the midterm.
Yes, so basically, when looking at the companies that have been affected by COVID, I would say that the companies that were already in trouble earlier may have accelerated problems. So I think we as investors it's not like that we would just focus on working with certain companies. What we did, we basically created this matrix of trying to understand really the revenue impact versus the runway, and obviously looking the ones that had the shortest kind of a time to running out of money and helping those entrepreneurs in every way we could. And that was the first measure. But then looking ahead, we will definitely have few companies that probably will run out of money within next 6 to 9 months. And also this creative destruction is part of a venture capital business. But I would say that it's not only COVID created problems. It's actually mainly something that has been accelerating and coming along the way. Let's remember part of our portfolio, you know, there are quite old companies as well in the fund number one. So this is just how it is.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. I'm not